From this scenario, there's a lot to be considered. First and foremost is to determine why the school building is being closed. This is going to have a lot of effect on the steps I'm going to take and the process I'm going to follow. First to be determined is it due to declining enrollment, reduced funding, or poor nature of the facility. If closing of the school is an all-around cost-cutting measure, then we need to consider staff cuts through rifts or attrition, increasing class size, increasing or number of kids on a bus, or decreasing the amount of routes that we have. All of these things must be taken into consideration if the closing of this building is simply due to a cost-cutting measure. If the closing is due to declining enrollment, then we must consider cuts due to RIF or attrition. Ideally, people will retire and we won't have to cut any people from their jobs, just cut open positions. If the school district the school is being closed due to the poor nature of the physical building, then we'll make every attempt to keep the staff intact with no increase in class size, etc. Many issues need to be considered in this scenario. First off is staffing. Staff are going to have a lot of anxiety about where they're going to be teaching and if they even have a job. Some of them are going to go to new schools. Some of them are going to be working with new co-workers. All of these things need to be taken into consideration with not only the certified staff but also the non-certified staff. We need to determine who is going to go where and how exactly that's going to be determined. We have issues with administration, being the fact that we are cutting a building, closing a building. We may need to cut and have the opportunity to cut two administrative positions. Again, if it's through attrition, we don't have to worry about it, but there is a potential for cutting administrative positions. Transportation, the logistics of reconfiguring all the bus routes has to be taken into consideration, as well as the cost per pupil increase. Some students are going to be being bused further than they have before, which is going to increase bus times and fuel that is burned. These are all things that must be taken into consideration. A big effect is going to be on the parents, students, and community relations. Parents are going to be having to deal with the new building, potentially new staff, their students going to a school in an entirely different location within the district, and transportation, bus pickup and drop-off times, and if they will be taking their students to school, the processes at a new building. Students will be dealing with new classmates, potentially new buildings, new staff, and a whole different bus routes. And these effects are going to be not only on the students that are transitioning from one school to the next, but also for the students that are accepting students from the closed school building. Community relations is a major aspect of this. Climate and school culture have a major effect on a school district. Closing a building in a certain area of the district can lead to a lot of dissent from the residents of that area. There are many negative effects of closing a school. Things to consider would be service organizations that help with that school building. Will they still be able to help out in a way at the other school buildings? Volunteers, will they be willing and or able to go volunteer at another school within the district, which may be further from their home? And business relationships. There may be a store right across the street that loves having the school there, is a great partner in education, and now that the school building is gone, will we lose that relationship? All of these things must be considered. A major aspect of a school closing is school culture. When I looked at the National School Board Association website, I found some literature, and one was called Seeking Closure. Planning is crucial in debates on closing schools. And in that article, Babs Kavanaugh, a consultant from the California School Board Association, had this quote to say: "Closing a school is like cutting into the soul of the district. Having been through 2 reorganizations within a school, I understand the ramifications that this can have on the district itself and its residents. School culture for a long time took a hit, and even to this day still has a tough time getting to where it should be or where it needs to be." Robert Gonzalez, the Director of Student Assignment and Assessment in the San Jose Unified School District, continued, "A community may complain and moan and groan about its schools, but the minute you tell them they're going to close, you're committing a major sin." And again, I've seen this occur. People want to say bad things about the district, whether it be the teachers or the administrator or the lack of successful sports teams. But the moment you tell them a consolidation and school closing is happening, they will fight to the death to make sure that their schools don't close. On the academic side, I wanted to take a look at what effect closing a school may have on the academics and the students that are going to be affected. The Society for Research on Education Effectiveness had literature on their website, Closing Schools in a Shrinking School District. Does student performance depend on which schools are closed? The results of this study show that the transition to new schools can have an adverse effect on achievement gains for students from closed schools, but these effects can be minimized when students attend schools with higher average performance. The analysis shows no detectable adverse effects on students in existing schools due to the influx of students from the closed schools. Summarized, students from low-performing schools, when moved to higher-performing schools, increase their achievement. Consequently, the high achievers at the high-achieving school did not see any ill effects of bringing in the lower-achieving students. So school closure from that regard is not necessarily a bad thing. The literature continues. The results suggest that if a district needs to close schools, then closing low-performing schools and transferring students to higher-performing schools can minimize any adverse effects. That just goes on to continue to say what the last quote said. And finally, these results suggest that the achievement of students transferring from closed schools will happen only if students are moved to schools that are dramatically higher performing than the ones they left. The article suggested that closing a school building simply because it is low achieving was not a good reason. However, closing a building for other reasons and sending students to another school building with higher achievement did show gains. And these are important facts to consider in this scenario. For this scenario, I did interview Miss Christy Sampson, a principal at Southern Local Elementary, and her biggest advice was all about communication. And this goes in any frame of life. Communication is always the key. She gives us this quote: "In this situation, as in many situations, communication is the key to success. We need to have top-down communication here, and I want to make sure that the department heads understand what's going on, why it's going on, and what we need to do to make this a successful transition. I want the staff and teachers and non-certified union members to understand the whys, wheres, and hows of what's going to occur, and to make this as easy a transition as possible. Most importantly, I want other stakeholders, the community relations, the parents, the students, to understand why and how decisions are coming about. Communication is the key, and I echo what Ms. Sampson has to say here." She also suggested to create a timeline for meetings to communicate the plan and the goals with staff, parents, and community members, etc. She cautioned that all of these, or a lot of these meetings, should have been taking place prior to the official closing of the school, which I would hope would have been the case. It's important to communicate with the transportation director, the human resources officer, and school administrators. In one area, she suggested to make sure to decide the professional development needs of the new school buildings and possibly create new buildings' missions and visions. Her final comment was to utilize 7 through 12 certifications effectively. You have a chance to get creative and utilize these people effectively in the most positive light for the school district. So that is certainly something to consider, from the fact we're going from K to 8 buildings to a 6, 7, and 8 building, and we can get creative on where staff may go. As far as an action plan is concerned, as soon as I get this assignment from the superintendent, I want to schedule meetings with department heads to evaluate each area of need and how the transition will work. Immediately, I want to meet with the superintendent and find out what the attendance lines are going to be. Nothing really else can take place until we understand what students will be attending what building for the next school year. After these lines are decided, I want to meet with the building administrators to come up with enrollment figures and building needs. These would include classroom needs, how many classrooms are necessary to house the number of grades and classes per grade are going to be there, teachers per grade, and equipment such as desks and chairs. At this time, I also want to meet with the transportation director to discuss possible needs and begin planning how we're going to effectively utilize the transportation in this situation. Once the enrollment figures are out, I want to meet with human resources, union presidents, and representatives to decide staffing needs, movement, and potential rifts, and also any job cuts due to attrition. I want to send out a survey to all the staff to find out where they would like to go, and we'll make that as accommodating as possible. But everyone must know and understand that any discrepancies will be finalized by the seniority list and the negotiated agreement. After lines are drawn and attendance numbers are accepted, I want to hold a community meeting to inform the public of new attendance lines and which students will go to which schools. It's important for people to understand exactly what's going to happen early in the process to clear up any anxiety that may occur prior to the first day of school. Also, once enrollment figures are accepted, I want to disseminate specific information to parents and students through mailings. Bus routes, bus times will soon follow, what school they're going, the administrators at that school. All of these things need to be in place and let the parents and students know as early as possible. By the end of the current school year, prior to the school closing, I'm going to have an open house date for all schools with administration and teachers there to welcome in any new students and to decrease any anxiety for the current students on having new kids come to their school. By the middle of August, I want to have a meet the teacher meeting at their respective schools where students and parents can again go to the building, meet the teachers, find out what the expectations are in each classroom, and have a better sense of what is going to occur. The week prior to the first day of school, I want to have a back to school bash. This is going to be a big old party at each building. Free food, games, prizes. We want to get everybody excited about the first day of school, and this is going to help increase that school culture and climate, which may be affected from the closing of the school. In the beginning of August, I want to meet with the transportation director to finalize any transportation plans and disseminate any information to students and parents. It's important that they know when the bus picking up and dropping their students off so that they can schedule with work potentially, and or if they're driving their students to school, what time they need to be there and what time they need to be picked up, and the processes for doing both. Throughout the entire summer, I want to meet with civic groups and school volunteers to discuss changes and how these people can get and or remain involved with the school district even though changes are made. I'd hate to see a situation where a business right across the street from our school that's closing has been a great partner in education, and now that the building's closed, we never see or hear from them again. I want to make sure that they are welcome with open arms into our other school buildings and try to keep those relationships going. Same with the volunteers. People that volunteer in that school. Ideally, they can get to the other school buildings easily and can still continue to help in the areas in which they helped in what is now the closed school building. Throughout the course of the year, to help increase that culture and climate, I want to have as many community engagement opportunities as I can. I talked about the Back to School Bash prior to the beginning of the school. I want to have Veterans Day assemblies where we invite people from the community into each school building and put on exceptional Veterans Day programs so that they can go out in the community and say what great things we're doing. Around November, maybe late October, I want to do a fall festival showcasing what it is that the students are doing throughout their time in school thus far. It's another opportunity for parents and stakeholders to get into the building and feel comfortable inside their new settings. I also want to have a district showcase in March or April at the end of the school year, once again to showcase all the great things that are happening at our district. Included there will be a survey to find out how people thought the transition went, what changes need to be made, and what we need to do going into the future. There's a whole lot involved in this scenario. It really got you to think and focus on what it is that you need to do being the person that is in charge. And in this situation, it seems like a daunting task, but to break it down and the key being communicate with those involved to make it a successful transition.